Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Badass Marketing. I am joined once again by the ever so lovely Angela Duns. Angela, how are you?
I am doing great and I'm really excited to be here today.
You are? Why is that?
Well, this is one of my favorite topics. So it's really, it's the start of a new week, settling into a routine, things are happening. It's a good day.
And what is your favorite topic?
Repurposing content. We work so hard at creating content and trying to get it to be of value to our ideal audience. And then what? Couple people see it, something happens. How can we take that content and repurpose it over time so that we're not constantly reinventing the wheel? Because none of us has more time. None of us.
I don't need that. I have no time at all. Zero time. Yeah, I would agree. For instance, we have been posting content on a somewhat regular basis. That's what I'm going to claim on our website and have been doing so for 10 plus years. So we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 plus articles, blog posts, whatever you want to call them, on our website. And the reality is some of them are dated. If you look over 10 years worth of articles, best tips for 2019. So probably not really relevant at this point in time. So these are the types of articles that I was going. So what I do is I tend to update older articles as well. And we'll get to that in a minute. But I was updating something the other day, and I'm trying to think of what the topic was, but it was clearly something that, in 2019 might have been relevant, but in 2023 is no longer relevant. So that was kind of interesting. I don't remember what it was, but it was clearly a dated reference for something that, while it was a very popular tool back then, it clearly is not. Oh, I know what it was. It was referencing Netflix, and it was an article about Netflix. I'm in 2019. I think Netflix was very relevant, and now with all kinds of streaming services and Hulu and all kinds of other Prime and all those things,
The freebie.
right? We probably haven't used Netflix in years, seriously years. So I had run across this article. We had written it, I want to say, in 2019 or so. And it clearly is not relevant for today. So I wouldn't want to go ahead and update this particular article because its relevance. I think Netflix is still around, but I don't know. But its relevance, is it? But the relevance compared to when we wrote it in 2019 has obviously changed.
Yes.
So that was a case where, this was some content that was very relevant when we wrote it several years ago, but probably not so relevant today. So this is something that we either want to update or remove because it's no longer, relevant or top of mind and may not be adding value. So one of the main things is to actually just go back through your catalog of content and try to decide whether or not it should still be there. Particularly if you've been writing and posting for years. So the first thing is just sort of audit your content. Is this relevant today? We have a tendency, or I have a tendency to want to trash for what's the social media platform I'm always Clubhouse. I'm always looking.
Yes.
I have nothing against Clubhouse. It's a lovely platform. I'm sure it's fine, but it always seems to me be my go-to when I'm talking about things that have come and
Trashing
gone.
something.
Trashing something. Clubhouse comes to mind. I don't know why. I shouldn't do that. I'm sure it's a lovely platform. But when you look at things, it's like, is this really relevant? Would I write an article today about Clubhouse? Probably not. I would probably look at something else in order to find value. So I would say the first thing when it comes when you're thinking about repurposing content, it's just, first of all, look at the content and whether or not you should even repurpose it, or maybe just get rid of it. Maybe it's no longer relevant.
Yes, yeah, totally. I mean, with the advent of AI and, some of the things that we may have said even last year might be irrelevant now because of ChatGPT and some of these other, the image platforms and all of that. So yes, it's kind of it's funny. It's actually laughable and good entertainment to read some of your stuff from long ago because of what you believed or what was relevant at that time and how much it's changed.
Yeah. So at the very least, step one is audit your content and sort of decide whether or not this is something that is relevant today. And if it's not, figure out either you can rewrite it, repurpose it, or just delete it. I think in the Netflix case, I think we just went ahead and deleted it because it just wasn't relevant. It was several years old. So that would be my one suggestion. But this is also, once you sort of figure out there's something that is still good, but maybe just a little dated. It may have a reference to SEO tools in 2019. This might be something you just may want to refresh and update so that you can represent it to your audience without having to rewrite it completely, as long as it continues to add value in the current environment.
Yes.
No. You're like, no, it doesn't add value.
My ring light went out, and so yes.
Okay.
I'm having technical difficulties, and
So you're
this
not
is an
disagreeing
audio
with what I'm
pod.
saying.
I am not. No, and this is an audio podcast, so no one cares.
Oh, okay. So some people see it, so you never know.
And we're going to get away with the lighting that we currently have.
It is what it is.
Yes. So here, I have a question for you. Do you recycle onto multiple platforms?
Well, I mean, I think I do because once we rewrite it, then we push it back out to our platforms, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. So yes, I guess the answer is yes, because whenever we post new content, even if it's just new content that we've revised, we always push that back out to our social channels.
Yeah. So whatever might be the relevant platform for your ideal audience is definitely the place to recycle it to. Now, platforms come and go. So, 4 years ago, we probably weren't using TikTok. It was not a part, and X was not a part of the conversation. But it's always a good time.
Well, X was, it was just called something else. It was called Twitter.
Threads. Threads is what I was thinking of.
Okay, because I was going to say X has been around. It's called Twitter. It hasn't gone anywhere yet. Elon's working on trying to destroy it, but it's fine in its current iteration, I guess.
Darn good job.
He is.
Yeah, well, and one of my favorite tricks is, I've written lots of articles, and actually they started out as newsletters once upon a time, and I seem to add things to them when I publish them as articles, but I also will break them into small pieces and use them as a short form post and refer back to the article. And then I'm going to open up another whole can of worms that we can talk about later. But I use links to link my articles together. And that's another whole strategy.
Well, as you should, because that's actually, so there are external links and internal links. And Google's expectation is that you will have both. So in order to, optimize your SEO and not to get too far down a non-off-topic topic, you should be linking both internally and externally.
Yes, but also using your long form articles as a piece, a smaller piece, just one concept from that article, to create interest for the article in its entirety for those people that it might be useful for.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to repurpose, recycle content. The most obvious is you just rewrite what you wrote earlier. The other alternatives are you change the format. So, you know, if we've written an article about 10 things to do to improve your SEO, we could then turn that into a video, right? And then put that on YouTube. So that would be repurposing content, not necessarily rewriting it, but repurposing it because it's on a different medium, and you know, or it could be an audio file. You know, that's another option. It could be, you know, we could turn it into a PDF and then share it that way. So that folks that like to read PDFs, and, you know, you can search on Google specifically for PDFs if that's what you're looking for.
Well, and
You
10
know,
steps could easily be an infographic.
right. It could be right. Exactly. Repurpose. It could be an infographic. It could be a visual. It could be a video. Or we could just simply look at those 10 steps and agree with 8 of them. And those like, yeah, those last 2 don't quite work as much as they used to. So, and then they get updated. As long as the content adds value today, that's sort of your bottom line goal. Whether you reformat it, change its content, or, you know, the nature of it, is just to make sure it continues to add value today.
Yeah. One of the things that I did recently for one of my clients that I thought was such an interesting project, he contributed, he's an IT consultant, and has a very specific interest. He's really a geek about cybersecurity for attorney firms, for small boutique attorney firms. And he wrote a contributing chapter in a book. And he came to me and he said, Angela, I wrote this thing. How can I use this? How can I leverage it and maximize it? And so I read the chapter and we broke it into 6 small posts. And I shouldn't say small, they're at least 500, you know, to 700 words. But then we referred everything back to the full article that was hosted both on his website and on LinkedIn. And they all led back also to an Amazon link so that somebody could purchase the book, or they could get an assessment through his agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there, you know, that was an opportunity to take some existing content that he had written a while ago, and then you did a whole bunch of things. You created new content, you created social posts, and you also created links to, you know, for product.
And we added statistics and things to freshen it up just a little bit. Some
Right.
quotes, some interesting things just to make it more engaging.
I mean, one of the things that we do, so one of the projects that we're working on is we are currently revising product descriptions for a client of ours, because when we put them in the first time, we were kind of pressed for time. So we just, you know, we had 1,000 to add. So there's not a lot of detail when you're adding 1,000 product descriptions. So
daunting.
You know, we were kind of putting the minimal, you know, amount of effort to get 1,000 listed in a relatively short time. It's been about a year since we did that effort, and, you know, really we look at those descriptions and we're like, they're kind of lacking. They could be better. There's definitely room for improvement. So what we've been doing is just going back and rewriting some of the product descriptions to freshen them up, to add additional detail that, you know, we're more savvy to at this point in time, to, you know, just to give them a fresher, you know, overhaul. And the more, you know, the product description is more accurate and more, you know, functional for the person looking at it. So one of the key things I think to mention, though, is if you're going to go through this effort of refreshing things, one of the things, especially, you know, if it's a blog post, is to also repost it with a new date. So update the date itself so that Google realizes that this, you know, when it's looking at your posting date, that it's not a 5-year-old post, because you've refreshed it, it's now new, and therefore it should have a, you know, a more current date. So, you know, we will modify it, refresh it, recycle it, repurpose it, whatever you want to call that. And part of that process is to update it so that it shows up as being posted currently versus 5 years ago.
Excellent point. That is, yeah, that is a very important piece of that. You want people to understand that, yeah, we've added some details that make it relevant today.
Right. I mean, the other thing too is, as SEO involves, what we were doing for SEO purposes 4 or 5 years ago versus how we structure things now or have evolved as well. So we also will go back while we're creating or revising the content and look at the SEO structure of it and figure out whether or not it needs to be, updated or revised. And because it's been 4 or 5 years, it does. We sort of structured things for SEO slightly different than we did a couple of years ago. Most of the basic components were there, but there's still things that we now do that we hadn't done before. I can also say that another thing that we're doing when it comes to refreshing content is there's more focus on ADA compliance than there was a couple of years ago. So
Yes.
Another element when we are refreshing content is looking at it from an ADA perspective and making sure that from an ADA perspective, there is, all of our alt tags are in place, all of our, there's anything that would help, for ADA purposes. So we do that as well. Is part of this overall process. We look at the content itself and refresh the content, but then we also look at the functionality and components such as SEO, such as ADA, to make sure those have been up to date or updated so that they're relevant as well. So updating those core components as well.
So just for clarity for some of our listeners, do you want to talk about the alternative tags? The alt tags.
Yeah, so I mean, a picture is a picture, and Google and AI is getting a lot smarter than it has in the past. But some images, I'm always amazed because we, especially when we come into a project where someone else has done the work and the pictures just aren't labeled, right? And from a search perspective, we want, an alt tag, we want a description, we want a caption, right? So that Google, it's very clear to Google, this is a picture of a horse, this is still a horse, it's a horse, it's a horse, it's a horse. And with AI, it can sometimes tell it's a horse, but this helps Google aid that. Also, from an ADA perspective, if you are visually impaired and you don't have the ability to see this, your screen reader that you're using will say this is a picture of a horse, and I'm like, okay, that's relevant, or something more specific. But from an ADA perspective, we also want to provide that additional information so folks that are visually impaired know what's on the page and know what they're missing. So that gives them an opportunity from an ADA perspective to be part of that article and that process because we're sharing that information.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I want to mention is, the trending keywords and SEO things, that changes over time. And the way we talk about things, the way we express different concepts also changes. So those are things that you want to pay attention to. So if you want it to be optimized for today and not 4 or 5 years ago, pay attention to what Google thinks is the trendiest term for something specific. I mean, marketing, there are so many different types of marketing out there these days. There's people who talk about interactive and there's just so many different terms. So you want to make sure that you're getting those terms up to date as well so that they are recognized by SEO.
Absolutely. It's really, you just need to look at the overall piece from today's lens. Is this still relevant? If it's not relevant, can I rewrite it so it still continues to be relevant and add value? Then structurally doesn't make sense. Doesn't, is this optimized? Is it ADA compliant or an ADA, as much as you can? Is it relevant to what we're talking about? The other thing that's always important too is sometimes we do get into these buzzwords that get popular. So the buzzword from 4 years ago may not be relevant anymore. And we should look at the buzzwords and make sure, we try to avoid buzzwords because they do have sort of a very limited window of opportunity to use them, but they work. But also, when you're revising it, it may not be, look at the references, look at the buzzwords to make sure that they're still relevant for today.
Yes. Well, and another thing that I did when I was working on that chapter for my client is, you know, statistics move very quickly in IT. So we had to update all of his statistics to something that was much more current. And you want to be making sure that you're providing accurate information when you update things. You know, 2 years ago, for a lot of different industries, it's not current anymore.
And it also, that's also a great opportunity to build backlinks, because you can go to someone else's site that you want to be linked to, look at their statistics and say, oh, wow, these haven't been updated in 4 or 5 years. Write that person an email, say, hey, I see, this is a great article, but the links are a little, the statistics are a little dated. Here are the current set of links. Would you consider adding, revising the statistics, and then give us credit, or give us a link or whatever you want as a result? But that's a great opportunity, because we get solicited all the time for guest posts, and that's a nightmare, because you don't know what the quality is or anything like that. However, when we get solicited telling us, hey, there is either a broken link or outdated stats on an article, that we pay attention to, and that we will actually actively consider, because if you can find a broken link, we can fix an article, and that helps us from an SEO perspective. If the statistics are dated or no longer relevant, and you have more current statistics, we're very likely to update the article, because that refreshes it in itself. And that's a great opportunity to build a backlink, because thank you for providing that updated information, and in return, I'll give you a link. So, we used to do guest posts, and we've gotten away from them because they're just all over the board quality wise. They weren't consistently, the writing styles weren't that great, that kind of thing. So we tend to, decline those requests, but we do consider, if you can find a broken link on our site, by all means, let us know, and we will replace it, and we'll give you credit. And if you also, if we have some data stats or whatnot, if you share with us the current information, we'll link back to you as well. Simply telling me I have a broken outdated stats without giving me the new stats, like, yeah, I can go do that research. So you got to supply me with some additional value for me to want to motivate and update my article on my side and give you a backlink. But in refreshing content, sometimes you can help other people refresh their content, and there's a link building opportunity to do so.
Right. Yeah, and you don't want to miss any of those opportunities.
Right. Internal links, external links, absolutely. We're all about creating links when it's relevant and appropriate.
So let's talk a minute about evergreen content. I post a lot of things that really don't have statistics. They're a little bit more motivational or inspirational, or that really just trying to get people to take action on things or be inspired. And so those things are a little bit more evergreen. Now, in your opinion, how often can you post things like that?
Evergreen content, I mean, you can't post enough. So there you just can't, right? I mean, the more content that you produce and the more content that you post, there's more opportunities for Google to find you. So, there is no such thing as posting too much. There just genuinely isn't. Or I've never seen that. But, even with evergreen content, there's an opportunity to update and refresh, right?
Yes.
Even if it's just functionally, where like, okay, the layout for SEO purposes, again, we sort of revise our layout as things change in, the algorithms and whatnot. So, we may not change the content, but we may change the structure because it makes it more SEO friendly. Or it could be that, you've written this giant evergreen piece, and there's an opportunity to create 4 or 5 posts out of it. And maybe you could, rather than having this giant piece, you could sort of create, some sub pieces from it, especially if there's subtopics within the big evergreen piece. And then, as you mentioned earlier, link back to the primary piece, that's sort of, the umbrella piece as it may, that covers multiple topics.
Yeah, and one of the things, go ahead.
I was going to say, even evergreen content can be updated, clearly can be updated or should be updated.
Well, and one of the things that I love to play with, one of my rabbit holes, is updating the graphics. I recently had a name change for my business. And so everything that was created previous to January 1st of this year is now obsolete. So it's an opportunity for me to go back and look at some of the graphs that I've created. And maybe I have more sophisticated techniques, or I have a new graphic person that does things for me. And so I can make them into a style that's a little bit more appealing now in this particular environment. And put my new logo and branding on there and change some of the, change some of the colors, whatever it is, to make it a little bit more appealing.
I mean, the other opportunity, and I'll give you a very clear example, is when other companies change their branding, right? Because we talk about SEO, we talk about optimizations, and we talk about local search. So for years, we talked about Google My Business. Well, Google rebranded that product. So what do you think we did?
You rebranded your posts.
We went back and updated those older posts for the new branding that Google is using. And there's a lot of opportunities, for that, where if somebody else changes their branding or updates their branding, you may want to use that as an opportunity to refresh your content.
Yes, good point. Yeah, because yes, people get really annoyed if you use the wrong phrase or the wrong name and that sort of thing.
Well, not even that.
Takes all the credibility away.
Well, not even that, but the fact that you're using the old name just dates the article itself, because it's like, clearly this is several years old because you're still using the old name.
Right, right. And names, I mean, mergers and acquisitions these days and new companies popping up and companies disappearing. It's pretty rapid, probably more rapid than we've ever seen.
But we won't mention Clubhouse, so.
We won't mention Clubhouse at all. Name
At
will
all.
never come up.
No, because we have nothing against them for some reason.
Yes. Yes. So, from a marketing point of view, do colors change and the types of graphics and the styles of logos? Do these things change? Are those opportunities for updating?
That depends. Because what you're moving into is rebranding, right? And
well, I was thinking a little more subtle, not a full on.
Maybe not a full on, but people notice changes. So we actually did just recently change the color scheme of our website, because we've been using some new graphics that have a different color sort of aspects to them, and we did sort of, and it is subtle because we just changed the the accent color, and most people would not notice that, but we notice it because we deal with that kind of stuff. But it for us, it refreshed it a little bit without being over the top rebranding. It was just, everything else was more or less the same. The name hasn't changed. But we modified the accent color to be more consistent with some of the graphics that we're using today. So is that a refresh? Well, I don't know, but it was just something for us to sort of solidify the direction of the branding that we're using today, and make sure that certain things are updated. We had used some older graphics that we had used for a very long time, and we've since eliminated them just because I get bored.
Yes,
like, let's change everything. And we do that every once in a while. I don't know why we do, because it's a lot of work.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, but it was just to make it refresh and sort of, and I don't know that as a visitor, if you're not paying attention, you would have even noticed it. But we stare at it all day long, so of course we are very sensitive to it.
Right.
But it was just of us to sort of, we are using different aspects, and we've just updated the rest of it to be consistent. So that is something that's important for us, and that's a bit of a refreshing. It won't impact search, it won't impact anything like that, but it just visually, hopefully it adds to the customer experience that it just visually looks a little bit better, we think, in our mind.
Right. And I think things need to be constantly updated and refreshed.
It
I think
depends.
it's,
Like there's a balance, right? Don't be changing your brand every couple of months because that will confuse people.
oh
You know,
boy.
so if you change, if you do big changes, understand that, people might be looking for the old name or might be looking for, so, there are many, many perfectly legitimate reasons to rebrand. But, it's not, don't do it a lot. It needs to have a sort of a compelling reason to do a rebrand. And then hopefully once you rebrand, you can stick with it for a while.
Right. And if you're doing a whole new rebrand, you should do a launch so people understand, hey, we're changing our name. And it's an opportunity to attract new audiences because you're doing a refresh.
And because probably a new direction, there's an opportunity for new content to explain all
Right.
that and to talk about that.
Positioning. Exactly.
Right. Yep. And what else do you repurpose or recycle?
Um, well, one of the things that I think is really important is once in a while sharing personal things. So it's not just recycling content, but adding something new. So, personal information, updates about things, that kind of thing is a great opportunity for sharing content. It's not actually recycled, but it's part of the mix that keeps things fresh. And that, sometimes personal updates and things like that are what people really identify with. It's part of your credibility in the whole know, like, and trust that we talk about so often. Um, so, people share stories from 6 years ago, but they just found a way to make it relevant now and talk about it. And, a friend of mine told the story about why she became an immigration attorney, and it seriously is a childhood story. And she
Hmm.
added a photo from her as a kid immigrating, and that post went completely insane. Now, a couple years from now, can she use that same photo and elements of that same post, even though it's a personal post? I'm sure she can. She'll find other places for it to be relevant, but, just using it, recycling content that we've written before is not the whole thing. It's like recycling content from your life, from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is one of the features on Facebook is share memories, right? So they
Yes.
revise posts from a gazillion years ago, some of which we wish they wouldn't. But what's been really interesting is in my Facebook stream, a lot of what's been coming up is posts around having a 1-year-old. Right? So we are 10 to 11 years
Um,
beyond that. And it's sort of interesting because whether or not so not all of them are relevant and some, but it's like share your memory. So we'll repost it, add a comment, whereas some things don't change. Being a parent's being a parent, regardless of whether they're 1 or 12 or whatever. And others are just completely different. Like, oh my God, that was such a different time in my life. Raising,
yes.
a baby or an infant relative to having a teen or preteen. Those so you can also sort of compare and contrast, like this was like when she was 1 and now she's 12, and here's what I'm currently dealing with. So those are opportunities when you look back. If you've been around long on social media, and most of us have, things will pop up from 10 years ago, and there's an opportunity to sort of either comment or compare and contrast depending on whatever the nature of what the post was.
Yes.
So we actually, share a fair amount of those old posts, just because either it's just humorous that like from 10 years, the perspective from 10 years ago has changed so dramatically, or it hasn't changed at all. It's still relevant today, and will be relevant tomorrow. So
Yeah, that is hilarious. And I am so glad that you brought that up because I don't use Facebook for my business, but the memories that come up, I religiously look at those every single day. And
Mm.
many times, almost every day, it's the inspiration for something else. Oh, you know what? I haven't talked about that in a long time. Or, it sparks something. So if you're looking for ideas for content, don't discount some of those things, those memories that come up on Facebook, or, something that you run into from 10 years ago. Tell us how far you've come since then. That could be super interesting.
Yeah, I just shared a post from 10 years ago, which was a picture of the salad spinner in the dish in the washing machine. Because I had a 1-year-old. That's those things somehow,
Happen.
it somehow, but it was like the salad spinner in the washer episode, from 10 years ago.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, those types of things were just like, it was a point in time, we're not seeing
That
a whole
is,
lot of salad spinners and washers anymore, thank goodness, but we have other
well,
things.
and
So.
the thing is if we can add a sense of humor, if we can laugh at ourselves a little bit, that is a great tool for creating this whole know, like, and trust, sharing our humanity.
Absolutely. And your salad spinner. So
And yes, there is one other thing I do want to mention that I just thought of is testimonials and recommendations. Those are great pieces of content. So what do you do to recycle those? One of the things that I've been telling my clients is you can create a video yourself. You don't have to use identifying features, but you can say, here was the situation, the challenge, whatever it was that came to me. Here's the solution that we came up with together. And then here's the success that they enjoyed after they worked with me, or whatever it was that happened. But those kinds of stories, take your testimonials, take your recommendations, and recycle those into content also. You don't have to be looking for fresh content every day. Use what you've already got.
And I would also argue, though, that that's also a great opportunity for you to reach out to your client, maybe that you haven't spoken in a while. You can say, look, you gave me this great testimonial 100 years ago. We've both aged a little since then. Maybe we should update it, because things have changed a little bit, particularly if the topic's a little dated in which they're giving you a testimonial on. But it's just an excuse to reach out to them like, hey, I really appreciated the testimonial that you gave me a long time ago. But it's been 10 years. So maybe we should think about refreshing it, or, something like that. And it's just an excuse to touch base with somebody. For us, we do a lot of work with our clients without ever having to deal with them directly. We'll email back and forth, but, we don't really chat with them per se. So it's nice to go back and pick up the phone, like, hey, I'm updating things and it would be nice to get a new testimonial, or it'd be nice to, your last testimonial, you sent us, a couple sentences, but now we're sort of all about video. So let's do a video, and, you may change the format, but it's just a good excuse to reach out to them and to touch base with them.
Two huge benefits from this, Mike. One of them is, usually when I reach out to past clients, it is a business development opportunity. You may not be thinking about it that way, but they might be, oh, I was talking to somebody the other day and I think I need to introduce them to you. So that is definitely a huge advantage to reaching back to your clients, no matter how long it's been. Maybe a little bit short of 100 years, but a significant amount of time. Now,
no, it's been 100 years. We've been around. It feels like we've been around for 100 years.
Now, the second thing that's really a great opportunity about that is that our perspective on the benefit that we gained from working with somebody matures over time. We get to see a longer view of what that really enabled us to do with our business, with our life, whatever it might have been. And so the testimonial quality might improve significantly.
I mean, yeah, I would agree, because the other thing is they've just gotten to experience you for so much longer. So, you know, a lot of times we'll go back to a client after we've just finished a project. We're still all relatively new to each other. And they're kind enough to give us a testimonial because that project went well. But now, you know, several years removed, and we've continued to, especially if it's somebody we've continued to work with, they're like, yeah, that was really important at the time, but the reality is over time, this is what we've come to value. You know, and it may be just, you know, something, you know, about consistency, trust, those types of things that, you know, and we did the first project, it was fine, they were happy, they gave us a testimonial, but 10 years later, like, we still work with you because, and you know, that's a different testimonial.
Oh, dramatically different, and with so much more added credibility.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, we as I said, we don't always talk to our clients just because we're, you know, they're busy, we're busy. But I got a testimonial from someone recently, like, it's not a bad thing that we don't talk to you, because the fact that we don't talk to you means things are working. And what a great testimonial, right? Because it's just like, you know, they don't have to reach out to us because it's all working, and we're, you know, they only have to touch base when something's wrong, and they're not calling us. So that's a good thing.
And that frees them up to work on other things.
Well, they just, you know, the client was like, you know, I just know that it's done. I have a lot of things on my to-do list, and you're not one of them. So that's a good thing.
That is golden.
Absolutely. So there's lots that you can do to refresh your old content, refresh your website, refresh your branding, if that's what you're up for. You know, you can either do minimal or minor changes to your branding, or you can do a complete rebrand to freshen things up. I mean, and this works in the real world too, by the way, in case you didn't know. We're working with a client that's a brick and mortar, and they painted the front of the building, and people have been coming by like, oh, you're a new store. And we're like, no, it's just fresh coat of paint. But it, you know, just change in general, that freshening of the front storefront. People came in and like, oh, you know, are you a new store? It's like, no, we've been here 100 years, but you know, as long as my marketing business apparently. But no, I mean, you can freshen up in the real world too, but just by giving it, you know, the storefront, you know, some new paint, it attracted people who hadn't seen it, you know, or perceived it to be a new business because it looked different. And people were coming in and like, oh, you know, checking out the new paint. And then obviously once there, hopefully they'll come in and buy something.
So many things are great opportunities.
Repurpose and recycle in the real world.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing is, you know, we just assume that people don't want to hear from us about every little thing. And, you know, like the change of the paint on a storefront. You might think that that's not a big deal, but to your clients that only see you on a certain number of days in a year or whatever it might be, it is big news for them. So we need to take those opportunities. Yes, people want to hear from us. Or it's another way to attract new clients as well, or new prospects. Oh, they just did a refresh on their storefront. Well, let's go check it out. We've never been there.
Or you just may attract new people that for whatever reason, you know, the new look and feel is more interesting to them.
Yes. Yes.
So there's plenty you can do. You can repurpose, recycle in the real world, in the online world, whatever it is. And this is an opportunity to, you know, use some of your existing content, whether it be evergreen or otherwise, that, you know, has provided value in the past, to provide value today, and to continue that sort of ever increasing need for more and more content.
Social media content strategy is a hungry animal. Work smarter, not harder. Yes. Feed.
All right, Angela, it's been great chatting with you. As always, we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you like what you've seen, or you agree with what we had to say, leave us a comment below. If you hated what we talk about, leave us a comment anyway. We read them all and we will respond accordingly.
Until next time.
Until next time, take care.
Bye.